Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the CIB Presidential Seminar Series that we broadcast from Purdue University. And we have an audience today in person here because our speaker that I'm going to introduce today is right here on campus. And then we have, of course, audience from all over the world that are online. So welcome back again. And so indeed, as always, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. And we are certainly privileged to have none other than the CEO of CIB here with us today, Mr. Don Ward. And so he's going to share wealth of his knowledge about CIB and about the industry. But let me give you a brief introduction to his background. So Mr. Don Ward, as I said, is the Chief Executive Officer of CIB. He has been with CIB for over 4 years now. And as you all know, CIB is a not-for-profit NGO that was established in 1953 with the support of the United Nations. So it is the world's foremost platform for international cooperation and information exchange in construction and the built environment research and innovation. Mr. Ward was previously Chief Executive of the UK Best Practice and Knowledge Transfer Organization, Construction Excellence for 12 years, and its international arm for 5 years, which included 2 years based in the Middle East. He had other CEO roles that included European Construction Institute from 2017 to 2019, Design Build Foundation, NBE from 2001 to 2006, Construction Industry Board, 1996 to 2001. And in his early career, he was at UK's Building Research Establishment, BRE, which he led work on energy efficiency in the housing sector. So Mr. Ward has 40 years of experience of innovation and best practice in the built environment sector, specializing in policymaking, industry change, strategic procurement, supply chain integration, collaborative working and sustainability in housing, buildings, and infrastructure. He has provided strategic advice at government and sector level in over 30 different countries. So please welcome Mr. Don Ward.
Thank you, Mark, for that introduction. And hello, everybody, here in person and online. And thank you to the distinguished faculty who've joined us as well, and to my colleague Theo Haupt, CIB's Programme Director, and special thanks to the CIB President, Makarand Hastak, for inviting me here and for joining me this week in a visit to a number of our North American member organisations. I'd like to talk about global trends in construction and the value of CIB. I'm going to do that in a slightly reverse order. But first of all, to explain that I'm no academic, as you might have gathered from that introduction, but I was a building researcher, and I pride myself of having worked with academia for almost all my career. Briefly, I was at Alliance Manchester Business School as a research fellow. So I suppose I was briefly in academia, but in general, it's been a great pleasure working with you guys, but I'm kind of pleased I didn't work in academia. I wanted to start off by talking about the scale of the industry and why our industry is important. The sheer size of it around the globe. A $9 trillion industry, typically between 7 to 14% of GDP, depending on whether you're in a developed economy or a developing economy. Huge opportunities in the sector, both in terms of dealing with old building stock that needs renewal, buildings and infrastructure, or that needs upgrading, particularly in response to climate change. So it employs between 7 and 10% of the workforce, again, depending on where we are in the globe and what the business models are in terms of labour productivity. And it's responsible for around about a third of carbon emissions, which makes us one of the most important industries to get right if we want to do something about climate change. CIB is the global network for collaboration for innovation in the built environment. We have a kind of long and more complicated name than that, but let's not worry about that. The acronym originally came from the French Conseil International du Bâtiment, And we're established, as Macron said, 70 years ago under the auspices of the UN, specifically under the European Council for Environment in 1953 there, to facilitate the exchange of knowledge to support the rebuilding of Europe after the war. So a recognition straight away of the value of research and the value of collaboration across boundaries when it comes to being able to deliver the best built environment that we can. And we're a global association of membership. Got it. Those of you that are interested, there is a brochure we published last year to mark those 70 years, and you can download that easily on the website. We have 4 objectives: to provide a global network for exchange and cooperation in research and innovation, to improve, to hopefully contribute to the improvement of the quality of research and the researchers that carry it out, to make knowledge available and to bridge the gap, if you'll forgive the phrase, between industry, policy and academia or research knowledge, and to promote why research is important. And I hope that you'll see all 4 of these objectives reflected in how I talk about what I talk about. That will not be the last time that you see reference to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The nice image on the right there, and I'll come back to it as its importance. The scope of CIB includes all types of research, if you will, so technical, economic, social, environmental, business, all stages of the built environment life cycle, from the funding and planning and land assembly to design, construction, operation, reuse, recycling, demolition of built environment. And the full range of research, the spectrum from pure research, basic research, which probably isn't that much in our sector, but to applied research, demonstration, piloting, innovation, proof of business case and proof of concept, and so on, and then transfer of those results into the mainstream industry. We're a membership organisation at our heart with corporate members in the US, as shown here. Purdue is a major contributor to that membership base. The governance of CIB is that every year there is a General Assembly, and every 3 years they elect a board. And for their sins, 3 years ago, they elected Macron Hashtag as the president, the 26th president of CIB over our term. And with also Georg Reichard from Virginia Tech on the main set of officers. And overall, the board is some 25 people, and they come from 18 countries, 6 different continents. So whilst we may not have every country in the globe represented, I think we can claim to be truly global in who we bring and how we bring people together and how we're governed. I've already referred to this, but in practice, what we do, we add value for global research in three main ways. The first and most significant and most visible is to provide forums for global collaboration between researchers. So that in particular is through our working commissions and task groups, but also through, in particular, next year, every 3 years that we hold the World Building Congress, and next year it will be here. So I hope that everyone here, at least, will not miss the opportunity to take advantage of the fact that a large proportion of the world's leading researchers will be here in Purdue for a week. And don't worry, I'm going to come back to the details of that towards the end of the presentation. When it comes to supporting tomorrow's talent, we support a number of student chapters around the globe, and a child of the COVID era was the Early Career Researchers Network, which is an online network, all of which I'm going to cover. And then we campaign on issues which matter. For example, impact, in other words, why are you doing your research? Where is the impact being felt with either policy or with practice? And in terms of the importance and the value of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is, as I said, is going to pepper this presentation as we go through. Talking first about the working commissions and task groups, there are nearly 40 of these now. In fact, there have been over 240 of them over the 70 years of CIB, which is an extraordinary wealth of knowledge created by academics and researchers and industry and government players over those 70 years. You can just see highlighted there a number which we wanted to draw the attention of the UN to when we met with them on Friday last in New York. And I'm pleased to say that some pretty senior people from the UN will be addressing the World Building Congress here in May next year. But you know, I would suggest that those of you who are students or indeed faculty in the room, if you think about your own research for a moment, I'd suggest you can probably find a commission or task group, a subject area on that screen which is relevant to you, if not core to your work. And if you can, click on the website, click on that group, have a look at who's involved, and have a look at what they're doing and connect with them. As Purdue graduates here, or students here and faculty, you're entitled to participate in all of this. It costs you nothing. Macron's already paid the fee. So get involved and talk to your supervisor or talk to your colleagues about how best to get involved. As I said, at the very least, make sure you exploit the opportunity provided to network with all those people that are here next year. So why am I emphasising the UN Sustainable Development Goals, apart from the obvious that we were created under their auspices 70 years ago? And that is that there's no more important agenda in our industry, or indeed on the planet. There are some of these UN development goals which are obviously about our industry, all about our industry. You know, sustainable cities and communities is clearly our job to address that one. There are some of these other goals, and I don't know how well you know them, but some of these other goals, like gender equality or responsible materials consumption, are a problem for our industry when we have to do something about it. You know, we have to sort of act out, frankly. We're part of the problem in generating waste and pollution. On the other hand, when we do our job well, we're part of the solution, because we produce great housing, we produce great schools, great hospitals, and they contribute to great healthcare, great education, and so on. And when you look at it, and when you get those things right, you start addressing the absolute basics of poverty and hunger, because you've created people with the right conditions for life, for community and well-being. So, is there another industry that could genuinely claim to be addressing all the Sustainable Development Goals in what we do, either positively or negatively? And my argument has always been, personally, there isn't actually another industry that's more important. And bear in mind, we're responsible for 37% of carbon emissions, just as an example. So that's why we focus so heavily on UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's why the theme of next year's World Building Congress is, how does built environment contribute to progress against these goals? We even, when you look at our working commissions, all of them really have three dimensions to how they look at this. They're all ultimately focused on making a contribution in some shape or form to the SDGs, but they're all about global collaboration, they're all about futures, and they're all around people and the planet in one way or another. Even the very technical ones are making contributions in those areas. And the working groups and task groups produce publications. We have a database through iConda where you can access something like 30,000 publications and papers which have come either from those 240 commissions over 70 years or from the World Building Congresses and the individual conferences that our commissions hold. At the moment, those publications are typically research roadmaps. So what's the sort of suggested agenda for research over the next 5 to 10 years, according to the current experts in their field. We have 32 partner journals, so if you want to publish in peer-reviewed journals, in scientific journals, these are the ones we support. That's not to say there aren't other very good journals as well, but these our members recognise as excellent in their field. And as I mentioned, many of our working commissions, not all of them, will hold their own conferences as well as the World Building Congress. So there's always opportunities for conference papers and which lead to peer-reviewed papers. So use the platform where you can. If you've enjoyed this series, and this series has actually featured some very prominent and preeminent researchers in their field. Sorry to let the side down, but there you go. The 24, I think last time the series was 24 preeminent women researchers around the globe. All of these presentations are on the website. All of this is free to you as members. If you want to look for some of the experts in the field, you may well find that they've delivered a lecture in this series or in previous years' series, and they're easily accessed. Some great conversations in there. The student chapters are 25 years old nearly. In fact, we missed the opportunity to celebrate that. They hold regular events where the cohort of PhD students and master's students is big enough. Then they create their own community within the university. We're also trialling models where they might cooperate at a country, what the student chapter might consist of at a country level to again, just providing better opportunities for people to network, initially within their own institution, within their own country, and then to exploit the platform that CIB gives for global collaboration. We offer a number of awards and funding to students in this program, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Here's where the student chapters are, including here at Purdue. The ECR network was founded, as I said, during the COVID era, and it's about those people from PhD into, say, 5 years post-doctorate, early career development. So there are certain opportunities and challenges that people face in that part of their career, and that might include how to get published in the best journals, how to secure research grants, how to network, frankly, how to exploit attendance at a conference better. It also, as a network, provides the opportunity for domain expert events. So there have been ECO events looking, for example, at research around the globe in sustainable built environment. And again, there are a number of awards which we'll touch on right now. Sebastian, we're typically giving awards to the value of $2,000, $3,000, something like that. It's not going to change the world, but it could change your life in terms of, for example, funding the opportunity to travel, to meet with your peers in other parts of the world, or to attend a particularly significant conference. And there's the award for best doctoral dissertation. Those of you who are in that process, bear that in mind. If you submitted within the last if you were approved within the last 18 months, you're eligible to enter this award. The student chapter can apply for funding for a small purpose to support research. We're very keen, as you'll have gathered, to promote the interaction of research with industry. So there is the previous chairman, Keith Hampson, has endowed an award for ECR industry collaboration. And the Vistas program offers up to €10,000 for ECRs to apply to carry out specific. And all you've got to do is do a decent piece of work and produce a report for us. Yeah, that's all you've got to do. Hopefully you'll become an ambassador for us in terms of the value of great research and great collaboration at a global level. Let me turn to the subject of global trends then, and why or how research is so important in contributing to these. What defines the challenges we're trying to solve here are some of the big global challenges that the world faces. And they include, I like the pestle analysis. I'm sure those of you in business have long used this framework, but I think it's a nice six-dimensional way of looking at the world. And this is the world in which we are undertaking development projects, construction projects, whether new build or refurbishment. And politically, wars shape the world. There are a number of wars at the moment which are really affecting people. Economic migration. Post-COVID, we've probably recovered economically, although the UK hasn't recovered economically from Brexit, but that's another subject. We've recovered from the COVID, but COVID has changed how we work. There's no doubt that the understanding of work-life balance and where we do our work and so on, which has major implications for our industry in terms of what we build or how we convert, let's say, redundant office space perhaps or retail space in the middle of cities into something else. With those changing values and behaviours make a difference. We've a much better respect for equality and diversity than we probably did 20, 30 years ago. We care much more about well-being of our people, whether that's at student level, whether it's our employees. These things matter now. And that is shaping, what our industry is asked to build, but also how we're asked to build it. Technologically, of course, shed loads of improvement all the time. There's new technology all the time. AI is the latest sort of coming together of various of these technologies that everybody's excited about, but we're still scratching the surface of what we can do with robotics and even BIM, frankly. The sector, as I'll come on to a little bit, has exploited some of this, but has a long way to go. We can be super fast in adopting technology in our industry. We equally can be super slow, partly if there's a significant investment involved. It's not an industry which has a huge lot of cash lying around. There are legal changes around the globe, whether that's PPP, whether it's foci on modern slavery or bribery and attempts to deal with that, and that changes how we can do our business. And then I've really already emphasised some of the context for environmental challenges that we face. When you look at the industry, great slide. Something's gone wrong there. Let's see if we can improve that. We can't. Okay, so I've had to spend too much time on this. Structure, conduct, performance is another type of analysis which I really like because it looks at any economic sector. And it says, in terms of the business structure that you have going on, what are the issues, the conduct, the way people do their business, and the performance, i.e. do they make money at the end of it? What's the outcome of all of that effort? And you think about the structure of the industry in most parts of the world, it's a highly fragmented industry. It's not very consolidated. You don't have a few large players. You have lots of small SMEs, smaller players, and that affects how we can do our business. That we don't have supply chains, because supply chains would be a situation where people stay together and are regular suppliers all the time. We don't do that. We change our suppliers every project. All of that type of business behavior makes us different and presents challenges in the way if we want to be efficient and productive. In terms of conduct, that fragmentation of companies delivers a fragmented process. We must be the only production industry that separates design from construction. We call it design, bid, build. We are consciously separating and doing it quite deliberately because we believe that is either a value for money or a anti-corruption mechanism that has value. But no other industry does that. You would have your production people involved in the design process. You might say you would have moved to design build, and which some parts of the world have. We focus on CapEx, not OpEx, partly because we can't predict the operating costs of our facilities necessarily as well as we need to, and therefore at the procurement point we're not able to make an assessment of CapEx and OpEx and select on whole life value for money. The only thing we can assess is the potential capital price, but then we allow the market to get involved, and so we end up selecting a price which is not necessarily the most economically advantageous or indeed the most deliverable, but it is the cheapest. Cheapest, which doesn't necessarily in the result end up being able to deliver to that price. So that highly competitive industry, because it's so fragmented, and that lowest price bidding approach followed up with low payment practices because of low profitability through the sector, and poor health and safety and welfare practices for the same reason in many parts of the world, all of which leads to an industry which is not highly profitable, except perhaps in the materials sector or perhaps in certain consultancy roles, but it suffers from payment disputes and claims and so on and so forth. And it has poor productivity, and it always has skill shortages. We're very boom bust. So the first thing that a government will turn off, or indeed the private sector will turn off in a time of recession, is capital investment. So we're the first to go into recession, but we're the last to recover because confidence is slow to recover on the upturn. But then when it does recover, boy, oh boy, do we fast need resource, and we don't any longer have it because we laid it all off during the recession. So skill shortage is endemic around the world, it seems to me. We've also got a disregard for the natural environment. Too many building sites who, frankly, don't care about the pollution they're causing, whether that's noise, dust, or water pollution. And we're a bit inconsiderate to our neighbours in terms of noise and when we do our work and so on. When you wrap all that up, there are plenty, if that sounds like a gloom and doom scenario, it isn't meant to be in the sense of that's what we're up against, but at the same time there's plenty of parts of the world and plenty of subsets of the industry who are trying to do something about this. And what you can see is a lot of people taking very seriously, first and foremost, the subject of safety, health and well-being, on the basis that as an industry you can't go around killing people. But that is actually what we have done for as long as we've existed, as far as we know. And even in the Middle East, we were I was in Qatar for 2 years. I was there because they knew they had an issue with working in extreme heat conditions and with the way in which they were treating migrant workers, and they had to do something about that. So they sought to learn from other parts of the world who had undertaken industry-wide initiatives to address health and well-being. You see a response to the labour shortage, skill shortage in particular, as one of the reasons why people have moved towards off-site production, industrialised construction, pre-manufacture, because it's easier, not easier, sorry, the productivity is higher in a factory, so you need less people, but also the quality is higher. And potentially, depending on the demand flow, depending on the flow of the factory, potentially it's faster. Combine all of those things, it should become cheaper, certainly over the whole life. Now, whether that in fact materialises, I think is still up for grabs. And if there's plenty of research in our, literature, let alone elsewhere, which suggests we're not achieving those goals yet, and that we're not getting that bottom line. And until, the lessons of our industry are, until something like that does demonstrate a bottom line saving for the client and or in the supply chain, then it isn't going to take off and transform the whole sector. Digital, as I mentioned, certain parts of digital have made a huge difference. BIM has been taken up in large parts of the world in a very big way in the last 10 years. It was around for 30 years, but it's really made a difference in the last 20 years. And drones were taken up incredibly quickly because the business case was so obvious to be able to do inspections with drones. 3D printing, whether people have commercialized that yet is debatable, but we've seen even on our trip in the last week, examples where people are starting to build at scale for housing developments here in the US, let alone in other parts of the world where perhaps there might be an even stronger case. Other trends, you can see clients specifying improved environmental sustainability standards. You can see that in part because the government see it as the responsible thing to do. The private sector sees it as something which is future-proofing their investment. So if they're building an office building now, they know it still needs to deliver a yield for them in 20, 30 years' time, but it ain't going to do that if you build at the standards of 2020. It's going to have to be either now at the standards that the market will buy in the future, or capable of being upgraded in a very easy way. So that way you also see loose fit or highly flexible designs which are capable of changing use. And the lessons of COVID are that change of use is something that perhaps we ought to be stronger on as an example of resilience in terms of future, proofing for the future. People in different parts of the world, people have also responded by focusing on social value. If I'm a municipality or a local authority or a city authority spending some big money on a new project, why wouldn't I want some of that money to be spent on employing local people and creating jobs for local people? That's the whole concept of social value. Well, it's a simplistic example of social value rather than anything else. You see people much more focused on transparency, particularly, for example, transparency of the sourcing of materials. So do you know all the way back to its origin whether that material came from a sustainable source, let's say timber, sustainable forestry, or did it come from a factory which was employing people in a appropriate way, or was it a sweatshop? driving modern slavery in a factory in who knows where. Do you know where all your materials came from? Is increasingly a driver that's there through legislation, but also through this focus on sustainable development. And you see a focus on productivity and lean. It's a mystery does anyone research lean here? So it's a mystery to me why lean construction isn't absolutely fundamental to the project management and construction agenda of every college and university and professional body in the sector, because lean is just a natural way of thinking about how we do things. It's a natural elimination of waste, physical and other forms, and as such it plays to so much of the agenda I'm discussing here, and it delivers by definition, it measures stuff, and it delivers, therefore, quantifiable measures, quantifiable savings, however you're going to measure those. And I just baffled why that doesn't have greater impact. And finally, sector. I don't think you can yet say in our sector that it's a trend in uptake, but for sure, everywhere I go, everyone's saying, well, what's AI going to do for us? Particularly in the industry. The industry is sitting there saying, hey, do I need to be making an investment now? Do I need to be at least raising the awareness of my people on what AI may do for us? Or do I need to do something more drastic than that? Academic, everywhere you go, and don't doubt there are people here looking at the different opportunities it may give you, looking at the impacts of it. It's one of the great sort of questions at the moment. It's very exciting to be part of a world where life is changing so quickly, given that people have made available some astonishing tools for free to use. As we go around, we've been asking people, so based on all of those trends and what's happening, those global trends, what's the next level, where are the next areas of research? Where's the next areas where CIB could add value through task groups? And it's different aspects of AI. It's AI in terms of the technological side of it, but it's AI in terms of its impact on the construction process, on certain professional disciplines. It's even AI and its impact on how some of you are educated. And educational models are, undoubtedly having to change for good and for bad reasons. Digital twins, which is hardly a new thing, but maybe in terms of research cooperation could be, when you look at where some of the leading work of this is being done, it's in surprising places like Scandinavia. Mega projects. We still don't get mega projects right. There's something special about mega projects, over $1 billion, let's say, compared with smaller work. They're not the same. They're not deliverable in the same way. And pretty much anywhere you go. The UK had a spell where it delivered a series of mega projects quite well. So it delivered the Terminal 5 at Heathrow. And one of the really effective things that they did that then delivered success on other projects was they kept the same teams together. The same people then moved on to the London 2012 Olympics project, and many of the same cohort then moved on to the Crossrail project, with now the Queen Elizabeth line across London. And so if you're keeping teams together, hey, guess what? They get more efficient and more productive and better at their job because they're used to working together and the systems are the same and so on and so forth. Why we are obsessed with setting up a new team every time still defeats me after 40 years. We'll put out a call. We were planning for December. On reflection, we'll put it out in January to all our members. What are the other areas that we should have as task groups? What are the latest themes in your view, in the view of everybody, watching everybody in the CIB network? What are the latest things that would benefit from some global collaboration? Just to understand what others are doing in other parts of the world. Because don't get me wrong, the research that you're doing here is in a particular topic will be in the same sorts of issues that they are dealing with in South Africa or in Australia or in Europe, but the contexts are always different. So they'll be looking at the same topics, such as the list I showed you earlier, but the impact of those and how those can be transferred into policy or practice will be very different in South Africa, or will be very different in Europe than they would be here. Equally valid, but equally valid to understand what's happening in other parts of the world, because that gives you ideas. Oh yeah, I wonder if what they've done in Hong Kong and Singapore, because they've got such little land, and how they'd be big driver there for off-site prefabrication and also digitally enabled prefab and industrialization. I wonder if there are learnings from there that would be interesting here, you know. So there's huge value to be taken from that. And in general, and those of you, if you ever find yourself in front of potential research funders, or if you ever find yourself in front of governments or industry companies, why should I fund research? Well, I mean, first of all, people don't need to construction companies don't necessarily need to give you money, although that's the best opportunity, the best if they do. But if they just give you access to their data, if they just let researchers in to give access, and the opportunity for action research, which borders on consultancy often, is huge for companies, which will generate ideas for innovation to solve some of the problems that those businesses have, or at a country level, providing the basis for evidence-based policy making, a mantra which most governments will use, but actually rarely seem to enable in practice. Too much policy making based on dogma, perhaps, and not enough on what the evidence is telling us. It informs investment and development for the longer term. Let's not just make decisions today that make sense in 2024, but decisions that will still have longevity and will still have and make a difference in 2050, by which time we ought to be looking at net zero carbon. And it fosters global collaboration. And, you know, one of the things that CIB has really demonstrated is that research in our sector goes beyond geopolitical boundaries as well as geography. You know, one of the most important presidents of CIB, he had my role and Macron's role at different times, was Julius Sebastian. We have an award named after him now. And he was a very leading architect and policy influencer in Hungary in the days of the Iron Curtain. You know, but he was able to travel globally and made a difference in his sector in Hungary in terms of going beyond, you know, the political dogma of his country at that time. We respect that, and I would like to think that research, I mean, it's probably naive, but I'd like to think that research communities can collaborate no matter what the geopolitical state is. And I'm thinking in particular, we're concerned at the moment about trade with China. And I'd like to think that research would be one of the ways in which we can rise above that and work towards a longer term goal where people coexist and collaborate successfully. To finish with the World Building Congress, we'll be all here again in 6 months' time. We hold this Congress every 3 years. 3 years ago, or in 2022, it was in Melbourne. It was still within the COVID era, if you can remember that far back. So it was very much a conference which was half online, half in person. It was run as a pure hybrid conference. We're not going to do that this time. We're not a big fan of pure hybrid, as in everything is simultaneously transmitted, and everything is you're either online or in the room. It's kind of difficult technologically, and it's difficult socially to interact with that type of format. But we will be hosting it here. Macron does the co-chair along with Brian, who's here at the back of the room, and with Z Torbika. Those are the co-chairs for the conference. There's a nice piece of history in that it has been all over the world. This will be the third time it's come to the US, and reflecting some of the things I've been saying. It was in China 6 years ago. It's been in 5 continents, I think you'll see from that list. The role of the construction community in meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So what I'm trying to do here is tee up why that is so important, and why the discussions at this conference can make a difference. We've invited every paper that's submitted, and by the way, as of the time of speaking, you've about 9 days to submit those papers. It should have been last Monday, but most of you are rubbish at delivering to conference deadlines. So don't assume we'll extend it again. 9 days, I'm sorry that ruins your Thanksgiving weekend, but it really is important to be part of that conference, I think. And the best way to be part of that conference is to be an author of one of the papers. We will, I hope, be sharing lots of insights from lots of different parts of the world into many of the factors I've been talking about today. There are a number of other parallel streams, including the congratulations to those of you who've been successful in applying for the CIB Doctoral School, which is a 2-day opportunity for personal development for those who've been successful to join that. And if you weren't already, final slide, that's rather unfortunate. The last slide just had the website and the deadline of December. So here you are, wbc25.cibworld.org. I'm sure you're all just putting the final dotting of I's and crossing of T's to those papers. Sure you've sorted all that out. But don't miss it, don't miss it. So there you go, that was there, it's reappeared, there you go. That's the original deadline. So you've got an extra 2 weeks, but don't assume it'll extend beyond December the 2nd. So I hope that's been of some interest and value, and I'd be very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Don, thank you very much. That was a very interesting overview of global research and where the trends are. And so let me open the floor to our audience and see if you have any questions coming up. But before we do that, we also have certain dignitaries who have come all the way from other part of the world and other part of the US, both at the same time. Professor Theo Haupt and Mrs. Feriel Haupt, they're both here traveling, originally from South Africa, but presently coming from Wyoming. So that's why I said, different ends of the US and also parts of the world. So let me open the floor for questions. Yes, go ahead, Martin.
That's a great presentation, thank you. So I have a question regarding the effect of heat stress on productivity. That's my
heat stress.
Yeah, so my research is focused on the effect of heat stress on the labor's productivity in construction. So when I was doing my research, I stumbled on papers all over the world, like India, China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, but nothing from Qatar. Even though, like, when they were preparing for the World Cup, you mentioned that they overworked their laborers and there has been like accidents and people died of that, but I didn't see any publications or papers on that specific topic. And I'm curious, like, since you spent time at that time, can you share like any statistics, like what happened, how they addressed this problem exactly?
So the questions about heat stress and why we haven't seen so much papers or other evidence coming out of Qatar, given that there was a focus on that subject in the build-up to the World Cup 22. Thank you. I don't know is the answer to that. We worked quite hard to persuade them to partner with Qatar University, and to some extent Hamad bin Khalifa, over research into this topic. The fact is that the world's media, particularly the British media, I would say, made it very difficult for the Qatar government to be completely open about what they were doing, because there was a lot of lobbying, including by NGOs, and some of it, a lot of it well-meaning, which was seeking to highlight the problem of how many people were dying in Qatar during the construction programs. But none of the data made any sense at all that was being quoted in the British media. I can tell you that. And in particular, and just to give you one almost simplistic example, they were counting every death in Qatar, and every death is a tragedy, but people die. Yeah. They counted every person who was repatriated to their home having died as a construction death. Now that's clearly bonkers. People die. And the best we could see was about 10% of those fatalities were construction related. And probably the majority of those would be due to some sort of aspect of heat stress. You had a lot of people there from places like Nepal, and they're not used to heat. They're used to cold. They had the same type of worker, indeed, they had some pretty standard worker regulations that they wouldn't work in the middle of the day. One of the things we managed to achieve was to change that type of guidance to don't work above a certain temperature. no matter whether that's in the middle of the night, not literally that happens very often, but so you had some longer downtimes during the day, but more working during the night. I mean, you're talking about temperatures well over 40 degrees, right? It's inhumane to put people out in those conditions. And the Qatari government realised that. They didn't realise it not just because they were getting all this criticism from NGOs and from the British press and so on, but because it was clearly bad business for them to be delaying their projects in this way. I mean, every time someone died, you have a pause on the project, right? I mean, it's a callous way to think about it, but it's an expensive way to carry out your project when you're having to stop work every so often. So there was a business case for doing it. There was a PR reason for doing it, if you like, and in part there was a wish to respond to the pressures, and they were under pressure from the World Cup people, from FIFA, who obviously don't want to be associated with a project which has bad headlines like that. Now, why collectively, why Qatar University and others have not been able to publish papers, I'm not able to comment. I wasn't working with Qatar University, was there working directly with the Qatar authorities, but we got in place a lot more well-being facilities, welfare facilities on sites, even simple access to water. We weren't doing anything clever, by the way. If you look at Singapore, Hong Kong, they've come up with cooling helmets, haven't they, and things like that, technologies like that. They have their place, but they're not addressing the root cause, are they? And the root cause is they're asking people to work in inhumane conditions. Now, sorry, if I just carry on, thinking about Saudi, around about 2019, and this was interrupted by COVID, there was a huge interest, for example, in the giga projects on the Red Sea, NEOM and so on, in off-site production. And I'm particularly thinking of the Red Sea Development Corporation, building a lot of hotels and other facilities for tourism on the Red Sea. A lot of interest in that being off-site production. And 2 or 3 reasons for it being off-site production. One, normal production can harm the environment. So off-site hopefully has less impact on the area that you're installing the facility. And bearing in mind this is the Red Sea, you're absolutely killing the golden goose if you start making a mess of the Red Sea by building hotels to bring tourists in to enjoy the Red Sea. So there was a good reason for doing it for that reason. There was a good reason for doing it because of the labour shortages and the problems of working in heat. So they understood that message, and because of the sheer volume of projects, actually it's potentially cheaper because you're building the same thing time after time, and you're just putting it in a row all the way down the seashore. So you may as well prefabricate that and just ship it in, and it's a relatively straightforward project. So long way still to go. There's learnings, but a great example of global collaboration, because there's learnings to be had from Africa, there's learnings to be had from Hong Kong and Singapore in terms of how they've dealt with this. As you mentioned, China, there's work in China on heat stress. We were there in Beijing just 5 months ago, hearing about some of that. So I think the research community has clearly a duty and a responsibility and an opportunity to share that knowledge much better than it seems that they have done from Qatar. But thank you for the prod, because I'll have a chat with my mates at Qatar University and just try and understand that, because that doesn't make sense that they've not been able to publish some of their work. How do you learn? Absolutely right. And it was a goal. You know, the project took, the time I was there was the time of the embargo between Saudi and between parts of most of the GCC and Qatar. So it was kind of difficult to share directly knowledge at that time. But that just doesn't stop academics. That's the point I've already made. Academics need to rise above that those types of barriers. And it didn't stop me as a Brit travelling between Qatar and Saudi and coming to talk to the Saudi Contractors Association and going to the Red Sea Development people and understanding what some of these drivers were for them and whether some of the learnings that we had would be helpful. Well, you know, it's 5 years since I was there, 4 years since I was there, so it sounds it will have moved on significantly, And if Qatar has missed the opportunity to be seen as a leader in this field in their region, well, in a sense, more fool them, and more all power to Saudi's elbow if that's now a focus for improvement for you, because this is such an important area to make a difference in.
Thank you, Majid. Other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about robotics in construction? I just caught an article that came across my email claiming the potential for this robot to improve efficiency by 85%. And unfortunately, it's written by an English major, so.
Oh dear.
Yeah. But can you talk about robotics in general, and how quickly will we be able to take advantage of robotics so that we can improve the productivity?
A massive caveat. I like to think I know a little bit about quite a bit, but not a lot about anything, frankly. If I have an expertise, it's around procurement, and it's been around sustainable built environment since my early days. Robotics is not my scene at all. We have a very, very strong working commission on information technology in construction, and it does cover robotics. What I can tell you from what I hear and what I see as we travel around is that we're playing with robotics at the moment. I'm not seeing any meaningful use of robotics in the real industry. I'm absolutely happy to be corrected by anybody here who's seen it for real. I've seen robotics, and I've seen 3D printing. It was absolutely brilliant. If they came in here and were given this particular room as a basis for them to build a perfectly repeatable brick wall, the robot would do a fantastic job. Doing that on a real construction site at the moment, or even in a real factory, at the moment is really tough. I mean, the Chinese are claiming some astonishing achievements in terms of 3D printing, in terms of use of robots. And if those are right, then we've got a lot of catching up to do. But there must be people in the room who are expert on this, not me. Can anyone help Ted here?
There's a bit of work going on here at Purdue as well in terms of robotics. Professor Hassan Zadeh is not here today, but she would have, I'm sure, commented on that. We also have bricklaying robots that are being tested. Again, you're absolutely right, not on the construction side, but this is more on the research front. And during our trip, we came across robots being tested as well in the laboratory setting. So not in the real world as yet.
But I suppose one of the questions you asked, Ted, is how soon can we expect it? And what you do see is actually you see the same type of robots being trialled. And bearing in mind, if 3 or 4 institutions are testing or developing the application of those robots, then you can probably say we're not far from market, because 3 or 4 different organizations, particularly if they collaborate, are going to move a lot faster in terms of implementation. And when you look at how quickly drones got applied, I mean, it was inside 5 years, so which is fast in our sector. It's not fast in, biogenetics. They make improvements every minute, but literally every minute as fruit flies die and so on. But it's fast by our standards. So, and it'd be for most of the people in this room, apologies Theo, for most of the people in this room, it'll be early in your career and this stuff is mainstream because of the drivers for it, the pull for it, whether it's a focus on quality, whether it's a focus on labour shortage, whether it's a focus on working in extreme heat conditions. Assuming we can build robots that can do that can withstand that heat, then surely that's going to have a very strong business case. You'd like to hope it would. Yeah.
Thanks, Ted. Any other questions? Yeah. Just press that button. Yeah.
This button?
The one with the green.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to well, one is a comment, and I think just to respond to there was a bricklaying robot, I think, developed by an Australian company, and about a year ago, I think they were awarded a contract to build 300 houses. I haven't followed how successful that was, but I could maybe get that information and then send it to you as a case. The other question was more comment. We're talking about robotics, and many people are asking the simple question: are robotics going to take over the world? And I think people who work are concerned about the adoption of modern technologies and a threat to themselves in terms of their opportunity to actually work and generate an income. So in Europe, in parallel to I4R, is a major discussion and a new movement in terms of looking at what they call Industry 5.0. And the concept is to how do you bring a balance between the adoption of technology and the human element in partnership. And Construction 5.0 would be a very good task group that one can look at how do we do this. Look at the human element in contrast to, say, AI and all the other robotic things that are happening at the same time.
That's cool.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Deepak.
So, as students, how do we be part of the task groups, and how can we engage with these commissions?
Yeah, just contact the CIB Secretariat. We'll connect you. Just let us know which group is of interest to you. The commissions, most of the commissions, well, in fact, maybe all of the commissions will be here next May. Certainly all the leaders of them, all the commissions. So we can connect you into the network, and they may or may not between now and next May have a meeting, have an event. But for sure you can be certain they're on this campus in May 2025. So just don't miss that opportunity. But contact me. I mean, my email details are here. So just drop me a line and I'll connect you into the right commission for you. Which one are you interested in?
But it's quite interesting to see the
Yeah.
research focus ECIB that connects us with industry.
Absolutely.
Very good. Yeah.
Thank you, Deepak. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation. I learned some things about CIB, and one of the things was that it was started by the UN, and we've got a focus at our conference about the UN, and I know we're bringing in some guest speakers. Organizationally, is CIB still connected to the UN in some way? If there's an org chart, do we sit somewhere in that structure? And if not, is it something that we should be looking at reconnecting, I guess?
Absolutely. So we need to reconnect at a strategic level, at a policy level. At the moment, our links have become tactical. So, for example, we partner with UNEP on a major conference series called the Sustainable Built Environment (SBE) conference series, which is a conference series that's been running for certainly 20 years, which UNEP is a partner in. We are members of what's called the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, which is initiated following the Paris COP, which would be, was it 2016, which set up the Global Alliance for Building and Construction as a means to bring together advice on policy making for the UN around COP's agenda, around carbon emissions. And by the way, the most important thing Global ABC does at the moment, in my view, is publish the annual report on global carbon emissions. Global ABC does the contribution for built environment, but 37% of the report, therefore, is down to the Global ABC. So that's a really important compendium of reliable data for those of you who are tracking data or want information about this scale. One of the reasons Maka and I went to see the UN last Friday is to get that relationship much more up to a strategic role, Brian, as you're implying. And the phrase they used was, whilst they see Global ABC as a body which can support them in terms of policy development, they would like a research partner or a network that is as a partner, as a research network that they can tap into. And there isn't a more global and more powerful research network than CIB. So I feel like they opened the door there, and our job is to walk through it with the right proposition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Hubbard. Any other questions, comments? Well, we have about time for maybe another question. Let me go to our people online. Any questions from audience online? Please open your mic and ask question. I cannot see anybody, but
No, so I try and take this off the screen, and then that might help.
Yeah.
There you go.
Any hands going up? No, I don't see any. All right. Well, in that case, let me ask my last question. I always have the privilege of doing that. So, Don, you just touched upon policy, and I was wondering that, you know, CIB is a network, and it's a think tank with all these members, all these researchers and research institutes, you know, working on groundbreaking research. So the question that perhaps comes to everybody's mind is that how can CIB as a collective influence policy in a particular country?
I think the raw material is there, whether it's through individual members in that country or whether it's through the products of the working commissions. The challenge is to make that connection, isn't it? So, you know, I don't sit in our office online constantly looking for you know, what's the current problem they're discussing in Zambia, or what's the current problem they're discussing in Indonesia. I don't have time, you know, we don't have the resource capability to do that. What we can do is respond to demand. So if someone contacts us and says, you know, we're interested in information which can inform our policy making on this subject, then we can connect them with the right experts. And a good example of that recently was the Canadian government. So going back 2 years, Canadian government starts responding to the COP agenda on climate change and decides it wants to set some policy around net zero. I found it really illuminating and impressive that the instinct of some of the people there was to find out what others in the rest of the world had done on net zero policy making. What an interesting way for a government to start. I can tell you they wouldn't do that in the UK. They'd start reinventing the solution for themselves. At least that's been my experience in our sector for more often than not. So, but what they did was inspire a working commission of CIB. So if you noticed TG 124, you wouldn't have seen that it was TG 124, but bottom right on my list of task groups was one on net zero policy. Led by the Canadians, actually co-led with the New Zealanders. They're kind of similar, those countries, in terms of how they're governed. That, I believe, will be a great exploitation of the CIB think tank function, as you describe. And I genuinely hope it leads to better policy making by Canada.
We have another question coming up. Go ahead, please.
No, it's just a comment, and I think I shared this earlier. We had a CIB linked event in South Africa last year. Don was there. And there was an industry roundtable and a conversation just around a failed policy implementation by the government that came into power based on a white paper to transform the construction industry in 1996. And as a result, and that event was held at a CIB member, Nelson Mandela University, and we've had an election, change in ministers, and we actually, as a result of that engagement, now are able to have a conversation with that particular Minister of Public Works on policy and how to improve their performance. So I think there are opportunities, depending on how individual member organizations take up that opportunity to influence policy. I think there is an audience there if we find the right connections.
That's a very good point.
There's an audience and there's a resource, and it's about connecting the two things, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, since the floor got opened again, let me ask. All right, well, thank you all very much. Let's give Mr. Ward a big round of applause. So just so that you all know, next week we'll take a break. So we have Thanksgiving coming up, and so we'll not meet for the seminar next week, but stay tuned. We have one more seminar coming up the week after. So with that said, have a great week, have a great weekend, enjoy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you after that week.